Sounds good, man.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Dave. Got a special guest on today, this little humble platform that I keep tweaking. And I want to thank my, could be my good friend. I don't know. He's new to me, but I'm hoping that he and I have a friendship and we can, make a difference here in the state of Florida. His name is Dennis Misigoy. He is running for the United States Senate here in the state of Florida. Pretty big deal. He's running as a libertarian, which takes a lot of courage and a lot of hard work just to overcome the system, to be on the ballot, which he is. Dennis, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Running for U.S. Senate, yeah, it's a wild thing to try to do. But no, absolutely. I'm doing well and glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be on. I really appreciate it. Every opportunity, as you can imagine, when we try to reach to anybody that we haven't already reached, is a big deal. So I'm happy to be here.
All right. Well, I'm going to dive right into the issues. I was checking out your platform, and I think your platform is awesome. First of all, I want to talk about the first item you had was about the Ukraine-Russia thing, which is driving me crazy because the media it's just weird. Yesterday we had Zelensky and his wife and
the Vogue spread.
Yeah.
And I keep joking, where's the spread for what's been going on in Yemen?
Ooh, wow. Ooh, see,
I don't know if those pictures are going to be quite as I don't think those pictures are going to be quite as sexy, but
no.
Those are important pictures for people to see and to kind of get a grasp on what's going on, and more importantly, what's going on your dime. What we've been actively supporting for years and years since Obama was in office. So it's important for people to understand it. So yeah.
So you're obviously most Americans, regardless of what their party affiliation is. I don't know about on the hard left. But there are people that just go, okay, we're sending billions. Just say this, we're sending, and people are just voting for it. They're just, see, and you're running against a guy, right, who rubber stamped this, Marco Rubio, who's
not only him rubber stamping it, but also the very likely Democrat who's going to be in that race as well, Val Demings. I think far and away the front runner, and they have a primary this month. Yeah. Because the primaries are August primaries here in Florida, but and Val Demings is very likely to be the Democrat who comes out of that as the Senate candidate, and she does exactly the same thing. By the way, she votes for every NDAA and probably every kind of spending that she gets a chance to, but certainly the NDAAs, and I put a little video together when I was doing it when the last year's NDAA was going out. I thought it was in particular kind of remarkable that even after ending the longest war in American history and getting out of Afghanistan, whatever you think about what it looked like, that even after that, we're still increasing spending. We went up over $750 billion, over 700, and I think what was the final number was around 762 billion. I'm not quite sure.
It's close.
And this year for next year's NDAA, for fiscal year 23, NDAA, the numbers getting even more obscene. We're talking like 840 plus billion.
Yeah. Never goes down.
I put a little poll on my Twitter page. If anybody's on Twitter, you want to go throw your vote on that. But we are I think that's going to be like more than triple. That's more than triple China's budget. China's, the big threat coming up nipping at our heels, that we're spending like triple what they're spending. More than triple, and probably more than the next, or I shouldn't say probably, but more than like the next 8 or 9 countries combined.
Yeah.
It's absurd. And so the question is, do you want, who stands with you? Marco Rubio, increase spending. Val Demings, increase spending. Or me, cut the spending. Right. I mean, we could literally cut it in half and we'd still be spending more than anybody else in the world by a margin of more than 100 billion. Easy.
Yeah.
And, but like you said, these guys rubber stamp it, and everybody is kind of asleep at the wheel. Like voters are us, the electorate. I have been largely asleep at the wheel, and we just kind of accepted it. Well, this is just the way it is, and this is the way that these guys do it. And The message I'm trying to put is there, it didn't have to be this way, but it also doesn't have to stay this way.
Yeah.
We've always got an opportunity to change it, and it's not going to happen overnight. But how long are we going to wait?
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, all of those points that you made, in addition to the fact that I'm sure you watched Marco Rubio when he was he was grilling Victoria Nuland, his friend, about literally,
yes.
I mean, providing cover, not just.
I shared a clip of that. Yeah,
just amazing. Like, are there some bio laboratories,
are there chemical or biological weapons in Ukraine? Dude, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons? And the answer was such a deflection. I think he was caught off guard. I think he thought she would just, she's just going to cover it up with a flat denial. And I think, this is all just speculation. Obviously, I can't read people's minds, and I can't see into classified documents that are so. This is just based off of what I can perceive externally. But what I think was going on there is I think Victoria Nuland doesn't believe that she has the kind of clout to be able to, if she actually perjures herself straight away, that she's going to be able to escape culpability for it. So I think she just reacted in that sort of instinctive, I'm going to cover myself way. And then it was so hilarious. She kind of goes off this, well, there's these biolabs, and, try to give this sort of answer. And then Rubio, of course, he doesn't want to have that conversation. So let's redirect as well. But if there's a biological attack, it's definitely Russia, right? Oh, absolutely. 100%.
We had nothing to do with it. Wasn't the United States. We had nothing to do with those labs. I mean, I don't even know how the labs got there, right? I mean, it was comical for those of us who kind of, and I'm not saying you're smarter, I'm smarter. Obviously, you're what, former educator, computer software guy, whereas I'm just Joe Sixpack, used to work in a call center like for 8 years, which was the worst job on the planet. But it prepares you for talking to people endlessly who want to argue with you. So I guess maybe that's where I get some of my so-called skills from. But I found that exchange to be remarkable. It really exemplifies how much I'm focusing on Rubio because I don't know that much about Val Demings, but I know, as you say, it's going to go from, the way I look at the Republican Democrat situation, it goes from bad to worse usually. I mean, the Democrats are, I mean, and this is why the Republicans they have traction right now, because who's driving the car into the ditch currently? And it's such a bad swerve off the road that people are like, just eliminate the pain, just make it stop. And I get that, but we've got to be careful because, again, if there's a candidate who's better, and you're better on pretty much every issue. I have one issue I'm going to ask you questions about in a few minutes that some more to the right of center or people care about. Let's just get on with it, like immigration. Let's talk immigration. Sure. There are a lot of people who think right now, our system is broken. There are people coming over. There have been people coming over for years and years. And what happens is one party will exploit it as like a humanitarian crisis that we need to do something about it. Another party says, we've got this problem, people coming in, we don't know why they're or where they're coming from, who they are, what their intentions are. And it becomes this, political football, if you will. But it is a problem because it overwhelms, like you got the mayor of New York City. It's like, hey, stop sending those immigrants up here because and they're like supposedly a city. Well, hey, come on, immigrants. And then when they're, all their welfare services are overwhelmed, now they're like, okay, we don't really mean that. So it's crazy. It's like, this is all just a joke. And I'm sorry, there are people dying, literally dying trying to get here. They're literally finding dead bodies out in Mexico, people trying to come here. They obviously
people like crossing over through the desert, and then people getting arrested for like leaving food and water out for them, of all things.
Yeah, well, obviously that's crazy too. It's like you can't. This is a humanitarian problem. It's also a problem that I think can be fixed. It can be solved. For years, we heard about this phrase, which I don't think means anything anymore, but comprehensive immigration reform. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. That was more on the left. They would say things like, hey, We need to reform the system. Okay, well, the reform means what? You let everybody in and you don't have any real sort of documentation. And look, there are people that are coming here, a lot of them, and this is the dirty secret, and you probably already know this. We've destabilized the Southern Hemisphere. We've ruined countries to the south of us. So what do those people do? I even heard Steve Bannon, who's like the Trump guy, say, these people aren't irrational. They're coming because they see an opportunity. They see like, okay, this is going to be better than standing in a line waiting for clean water or whatever it is that their country doesn't have. So, Dennis, how do we fix this? Tell me how we fix it.
All right. So there we go. It's funny because I had a conversation about this with another group and stuff, and initially just providing answers on a questionnaire and then giving a little more insight into it. But it boils down to this. Somebody talks about the system or tweaking it, and you hear maybe from the Republican side, well, we need to spend more money here, or we need to build a wall. Look, the system at its core is based on, to sort of borrow a term that was used for something else, the policy itself is defective. Okay. Mm-hmm. At its core, the principles underlying the system are just wrong. And so no amount of spending or personnel or building walls or any other structures, none of that is going to make the system work, because the system at its core is just wrong, and certainly wrong for this country and the situation. Now, there's all these other things that we can kind of talk about on ancillary, where you talk about, okay, destabilizing other countries, and certainly we don't want to do that. And I think that creates an additional problem, because you have people who maybe wouldn't want to leave their home, but are doing it just kind of out of desperation. And certainly I think you see a lot of that with the kind of immigration that has especially happened in Europe. It's a little bit different situation, but not totally dissimilar, where you have people that are displaced, not because they necessarily wanted to leave and start a new life in another country, but just because their homes were being destroyed, and they were just desperate. So, but you've got to get away from a system that, and I think basically for the last 100 years, since going back to the Immigration Act of 1924, where we started to have these quotas, and initially it was, by countries, and now we have these sort of different groupings and classifications. But basically what we do is we treat everybody as in these categories and boxes and groups. It's collectivism. And it's just not going to work for what we're trying to do. And also we approach it from a standpoint of, well, everybody stay there, and you need to ask us for permission to come in. Now that sounds, when people like to do these analogies of talking about like your house versus the country, but the country isn't your house. Okay. And this sort of way of approaching things doesn't make sense, because we're not talking about going into someone's house. We're talking about walking down the street and then, renting a room somewhere, or asking somebody for permission then to stay somewhere, whatever, that's what we're talking about, actually people doing. 100 years ago, the way things operated in this country, and certainly there were still some problems where you had like Asian exclusion and whatever, but by and large, people came to this country. They didn't, spend months or years, apply for a visa and go through all this legal wrangling and this, that, and the other thing to then be able to come over. No, they bought a ticket to come here on a ship, came in through a port, spent a few hours, got documented, checked out, and then they were kind of off to go live and build a new life. Yeah. And that was the default, and it worked. And it worked for this country, and it worked for what it attracts, because this country does attract people who want to find better opportunities. It has always been a beacon as long as it's been around. Yeah. And we should want it to be. We should want it to be a place that people want to be. And I think the key, like I said, is to kind of segue back into that, was the difference between collectivism and individualism. Treat people as individuals. Each person who comes here, ideally, you would want to have them come in and present themselves. And again, I'm not the biggest advocate for everybody being overly documented by government, but hey, we'll make a compromise here, because but you come in, you figure out who's here, and because what we've done right now is we've made the path of least resistance be sneaking over the border. And I say the path of least resistance because, for the overwhelming majority of these people, there isn't even a legal path. It's one thing to say, well, you should come in through the correct channels. For some people, there just is no option for that, period. Yeah. And so if there's no option for that and they want to come in, well, of course they have to sneak in. And for some people, what if the legal option is wait a decade? Well, then the path of least resistance is still to just circumvent the system. What if the path of least resistance is to go the proper way, versus trying to circumvent the system? And then the only people who are trying to circumvent the system, and not to say that this is another thing when we get into sort of drug war and everything, but let's say violent criminals and people, organized crime that is moving across. For example, human trafficking. This is something we can universally agree to as objectionable. Right. Somebody like that is the people who's sneaking. But now it's a very much smaller number of people who are sneaking over. And I think that becomes a lot more manageable when you talk about border security and everything else. But when you have masses of people, when you have 10 million people here undocumented, well, realistically, what are you going to do? You're not going to deport all those people. Right. I mean, realistically. So what's your alternatives? And what's your alternative going forward? Because it wouldn't be the first time that they did, took everybody who was in these situations, you give them amnesty and whatever, and then you try to restart everything, and then it just starts over. Yeah. Because you haven't fixed the fundamental problem in the system. The system needs to, and there's certainly, there's more to be said about how you manage it. Where in terms of like how you can privatize and really leverage the free market for it, because again, part of the reason with people coming over here, in terms of when you look at from our perspective as the people in this country, you're talking about people come here and they get work here because there's a demand for the labor that they can provide at the price they're willing to offer.
Right. Are you still there?
Heed that the labor from reaching markets in here where there is a demand for it, then what you've done, you're harming our economy because you're not allowing it to operate as efficiently as it could, because of this. So there's a million different angles to it, but at the end of the day, what you want to do is not to reform the system. You need to trash the system and get back to our roots. You treat people as individuals. If we could process people in a few hours or maybe a day or so, 100 years ago, certainly with modern technology, we should be able to look at somebody and say, look, you're not a wanted violent criminal. You're not carrying some crazy disease that's going to, flip the world upside down. Yeah. Okay. We know who you are. We know where you're going. Just go ahead and live. And if you want to put in there some kind of caveats about eligibility for welfare services or whatever, you can do that as well. I mean, the welfare system has issues no matter what. Mm-hmm. But what we have now is clearly untenable. You've got, on the one hand, you've got 10 million or so people undocumented in the country doing their thing kind of in the shadows, and they're, again, sort of have to operate within the margins. On the other hand, you've got, we've had these internment camps of immigrants in inhumane conditions. You've got, what we're all seeing, was it maybe a year or so ago with, we've got border agents like whipping Haitians as they're trying to cross over and stuff. It's just crazy stuff. And it's all just indicative of something that either in one direction or another is not working. It's not working for anybody. And the reason it doesn't work for anybody is because the policy at its core of saying, well, we're going to let these people, and we're going to choose these people, we're going to give the priority here, and this is the process, and you got to spend all this money. That process doesn't work. The principles underlying it don't work. And so, like with a lot of other policy where the underlying principles are so bad, mm-hmm. That they'll just never work. It's the same sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good answer. I would say, for people looking for a little bit of nuance, and rather than just hearing the talking points of one side saying that, it's all these people coming over are bad. And I've never thought that. I've just wondered, mm-hmm. We do need a way, and you mentioned that, a way to at least document. I mean, there's one side that says documented, there's one says, illegal. So either way, you've got to have a system that works, that alerts people to who's here, and like you, I think you said in your platform, peaceful people who are coming over peacefully, who want a better life, and who are hardworking. I hate to use the term that, I think it was George W. Bush used to say, these are people who will do jobs that other people won't do, and so forth. I think that's kind of just, I don't know. There's something that I don't like about it. But
Well,
I understand the sense that if you want an entry level job and you want to work your way up and you want to contribute to society, then
yeah,
we need that. I don't know if you've been driving
yeah,
around, but we have help wanted signs everywhere. We
yeah.
got um
Oh yeah, I see it. I see it all over the place. I see it
yeah,
on moving vehicles even.
yeah,
So, and like I say, I try to take it like a sort of dispassionate way of expressing it. To say, look, there is demand for certain kinds of labor in different markets within this country,
yeah,
and where those demands are unmet, and not even just with what's going on now. I mean, even traditionally, in terms of like, what we stereotype for a lot of immigrants in terms of working in agriculture or low level, entry level service kind of job, whatever, um, low level, some construction stuff and whatever, all those kind of things. There's,
right.
there has been need for, and where there's a need for, are we going to have government? I mean, just from an economic perspective, do we want to have government in the way preventing that demand from being met?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what's the downstream impacts of that? It's economically harmful because we don't have the most efficient economy we can that
Right.
can deliver goods and services the most efficiently to people so that they can get it at the least cost and they still have more money left over in their pocket. Instead, we make it harder for everybody with policies like this because, and I'll come back around to this also, something that is in a large point sometimes based on fear. It was actually funny recently seeing, speaking of Rubio, a tweet or something recently where he said, it's easy to be for an open border when it's not like your hospital's being overcrowded or you're not dealing with like these fentanyl overdoses. And I'm like, you know, and to me, this is sort of the classic thing of immigrants being a scapegoat for politicians, and certainly the failures of their policies. When you talk about hospitals being overcrowded, and particularly this is a sensitive thing with everything that's gone on with COVID over the last couple of years,
Mm-hmm.
a big part of the reason why hospitals are overcrowded is because in most of this country we have certificate of need laws, which artificially restrain or limit the amount of hospital space that we have in the country. I don't know if you were, when all this stuff was going on, listening to these kind of stats, but I remember when COVID was first going on, I remember hearing a report that I think it was Korea or Japan, had about 12 or 13 hospital beds per thousand people. And in the US, it was on average 2 or 3 hospital beds per
Mm-hmm.
thousand people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a product of the fact that we have certificate of need laws. That's at the state level, but we have it, I think, in like 38 states. Florida repealed its certificate of need law, I think, in 2019, so just before all this happened, but not quickly enough to really, you know, really expand the supply, I think, too much until ahead of what happened.
Right.
Um, but we make it harder for people to be able to build hospitals and medical facilities. You have to have the approval of everybody else who are your competitors or would be your competitors, which makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
And when you talk about fentanyl, um, you know, dangerous
Mm-hmm.
and awful, but this is the byproduct of drug prohibition. Drug prohibition pushes people to more potent substances. It pushes the black market. It incentivizes them to find more potent, more dangerous stuff that they can get more doses in the same, amount of volume or weight, whatever it is they're trying to move.
Interesting.
So they can sell more and get more out there. And so the more potent it is, and obviously there's no quality control as well. So this is the two things I'm talking about right there are byproducts of bad government policy. They are the product of bad government policy. But again, we want to kind of shift the focus onto people who really didn't have any hand in making policy, people who just got here, or people who are just getting here,
Yeah.
or may come here instead. And so it's not a new thing in politics, but it's something I hope people be mindful of, because these are politicians trying to cover up their failures and trying to shift the blame for the stuff they've done, even
Yeah.
if they don't even realize that it's the stuff that they've done. Because I don't know how well these guys really understand this stuff. I'm not convinced that they understand it that well, but it is what it is. And I
Yeah.
think, obviously it's on me and anyone else and all the rest of us who do understand it to call it out and to try to put those things at the forefront so that people can understand.
Yeah. No. Again, good answer, good response. Um, you briefly touched on what went on for the past 2+ years, depending on what state you're living in. I'm thankful I live in the state of Florida. I'll just be honest with you, because Florida has been mostly open for business, but that depends on what county you live in, and the type of so-called leadership you have in those counties, and how they've decided to mandate certain things. Now, without talking about the thing that will get us booted off of YouTube here, which would be the efficacy of a certain product that is being, in some situations, mandated. What's your view on what the government did during that time frame? I think that turned a lot of people toward a libertarian view on just their own personal freedom, like, bodily autonomy, stuff like that. You hear,
Sure.
In certain areas, you do hear a lot about my body, my choice, right? But in that particular situation, we didn't hear as much about that. We heard phrases that were kind of a little Orwellian, like, this is for the greater good. And, you do what people tell you to do. These are experts. And I should put air quotes up there, and the health authorities. And you started to hear language, Dennis, that was really cryptic. I mean, things like, you're not going to listen. My wife works, or used to work, for a large healthcare provider. I'm not going to mention who they are, but we're on the West Coast here in Florida. And they were telling her at one point, when she refused to do a certain thing, you're not trusting what the experts are saying. And I'm thinking to myself, Dennis, I was losing it. I was watching the TV. I'm throwing things at the TV going, really? There's a whole bot. Let's not get into this, because I want this video. I want to promote your candidacy here. So I don't want to get into, statistics and things that are coming in now from all over the planet, all over the planet. So all I have to say is I was right and you guys were all wrong. All right. Now, I want to get back to the freedom issues here, which I think, you had Republicans that were like, we might let you out. We're not sure. You had all the Democrats were like in lockstep, like, nope, we got to keep doing this. You got school boards all over the country. Out in California, they reinstituted some things. And, I'm thinking to myself, when does this end? This is tyranny. This is pure, unadulterated, whatever the word I'm looking for, unvarnished, naked, bare naked tyranny. And people sat there. And a lot of people just sat there, Dennis, and, they're still walking around, because I see them. And they're getting their talking points from the news media, which I think is some of the most destructive, not only information, but psychologically, it drains you. It makes you into this person who's afraid to move or breathe or talk or say the wrong thing or use the wrong pronoun. I mean, it's getting crazy. So just a few thoughts on that. I know I kind of went a little overboard there.
No, that's fine. No, I mean, what we've seen over the last couple of years has been pretty wild in a lot of different senses. And I'm trying to think, which really thing do I want to touch on? Gosh, there was this clip I saw very recently, and I think it's a recent clip of the Prime Minister in New Zealand. And I don't know if you've seen this one, but she's basically saying, yeah, we're the only source of truth. So if you hear something from anyone else and we haven't said it, don't believe it. Just come to us and we will tell you the truth. It's sort of wild to hear that sort of thing. But also just in general, I have a lot of thoughts in just thinking about how people take in information, and most people aren't politically engaged, and most people don't want to be politically engaged because the most important, or at least it shouldn't be the most important thing in their life. And I don't want it to be. I think government should have a much less significant role.
Right.
Last year I went out to an event. It was like a protest over in Orange County in Orlando, where the Orange County was trying to impose a vaccine mandate on the first responders, firefighters and stuff. And so they were fighting against it. A lot of them had stayed working through it and had gotten infected and recovered and everything. So they had natural immunity as well. There's all that sort of stuff with it. But, one of the things I tried to, and obviously a lot of the people there were right-leaning Republican and everything. But as I talked to a lot of those people, I said, listen, you have to understand something, is that this didn't happen overnight. Government didn't grow to this point to where it could do this thing and basically try to, put everybody on house arrest or mandate what people could put in themselves, or mandate that they had to put something in their body and everything. This didn't happen overnight. This has been government growing. Everybody else paved the way for these guys to have this power. And it's a cliche, but they openly say it. Never let a good crisis go to waste. I remember when the whole thing first. I don't remember which Democratic congressman it was, but I remember seeing like a quote. And it was like, "Oh yeah, this is a great opportunity for us to like remake society or like remake things the way we like them to be." And to me, I find that really objectionable. The idea that you say, well, here's a crisis, here's something terrible going on, and people are suffering, some people are dying, people's livelihoods are being destroyed, all these other terrible things are happening, and we see this as an opportunity. And you hear this with the people out in the World Economic Forum as well. Who are to me, this is really exceptionally bad to be willing to leverage crises and human suffering to try to enact policies and all that. The other thing I'd say, just in terms of response, and this is something I think a fundamental difference between the Republicans and Democrats and us, okay? Because Republicans and Democrats approach policy making from a standpoint of an omnipotent government. No matter what they tell you, they view the government as omnipotent, all powerful. They're carrying the mandate of heaven or something, and they have ultimate say on everything. The debate between them is basically about what should they do, and the debate about what they do with COVID. Well, should they mandate it or not, or should they open things up or not? And for us, it's fundamentally different. Okay, for us, it is, and what I would say is a very core American, fundamental American value, which is the power of the government is not, it's not the mandate of heaven, but it comes from the people who are governed, right? That's a basic American principle. Well, if it's true that the power of the government comes from the people that are governed, well, then I can't vest a power in government that I don't have. I don't have the power to lock you in your house and tell you can't come out. I don't have the power to tell you have to, wear a mask or get a shot or whatever. And if I don't have that power, how can I give that power to government? And that obviously extends to a whole lot of other things. But for me, it's not a question of whether, government should or shouldn't do this. And it's obviously very much their attitude, and they love to declare emergencies. Emergency. It's a national emergency, state emergency. So we're gonna, now that it's an emergency, the rules don't apply, and we're just gonna do this, that, and the other thing because it's an emergency. If it were up to them, they would, have the emergencies be forever, of course. I think of how many other things have been temporary that have, what's the saying? There's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. So, but this is a bunch of scattered thoughts on it, but I think it's important for us to realize, and again, if you wanted to ask me in terms of, how should it have been handled? Look, you try to be honest and disseminate information, but you don't go locking people down. One of the things I vividly remember, when everything was getting started, like the first month or so, and some of these small places that were still open, I'm thinking of some small restaurant in like a strip mall, whatever. People were trying their best. People were trying to make adjustments. People were making good faith efforts. They put up some kind of plastic barrier between, because it was sort of open between, you had the counter and the register and then the kitchen in the back and stuff. And, people were making good faith efforts to try to make accommodations, but people who needed to go out and work in different areas, not to mention the whole thing with schools and that impact, people were doing their best. And if you give people the information and you let them do the best that they can, I think that gives us a better result than obviously the government giving the top-down solution. Would it be perfect? Look, there's no solution. There's no path we could have taken where we're going to get zero COVID casualties, where nobody's going to get it. We're going to stop infection and this and that. But we could have avoided, a lot of the economic troubles that have come out of it, a lot of the mental health, the spike in mental health issues that have happened, particularly among certain populations. So we could have avoided or at least mitigated a lot of that had we approached things with different policies. So, or at least I should say, not a different policy, a policy of not interfering in people's lives and dictating them how they need to adjust. We give them the information and you let them adapt. Because who's to say that, people out in the marketplace wouldn't have come up with even better solutions. But everybody was boxed into, this is what we have to do.
Yeah.
And that's rarely is that ever the best way to approach anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when science isn't skeptical either, that's kind of an interesting thing that I was thinking about. It's like all of a sudden science is no longer skeptical. People, the media is no longer interested in alternative views on anything. Second opinions, the old adage about, hey, my doctors gave me this diagnosis and it looks like I'm going to die. Well, I kind of want a second opinion, see, just in case he's wrong. So, I mean, it was really very strange. I mean, you were talking about the restaurant and the barrier and everything, and I still see some of those barriers are still out there. But I remember there's a park across the street. I live in Lee County, and there's one of the biggest parks in the area. And Dennis, I'll never forget, that thing where the kids go on and it spins around. I don't know what the proper name of it. It's like a little,
Sure.
Yeah, it's like a seesaw, and they had yellow tape on it so the kids wouldn't go on it. And that's how crazy. I mean, this was like apocalyptic. I mean, you'd walk around, you think to yourself, they got signs out in the fresh air, like from the state of Florida, printed these signs up, and you probably remember seeing them, giving you instructions on how not to get too close to somebody, how you can wash your hands. I don't
know if you remember seeing any of these cases where it was like, some guy or like a family are like out all by themselves, like out in a park or on the beach or something, like completely away from everybody else. And we're going to send police over to go arrest them for being out at this time. Which is wild because, at this point, at the point where they are and they're going, nobody's in danger. Now you send them, now there's cross-pollination. Now, if there's infectious disease involved on either side, now there's an interaction. And then you're going to take that person over and if you're going to arrest them, you're going to go put them in, probably in a holding cell where there's going to be other people. And now you're doing more of this mixing. So you're doing the result of it. Even at the best of intentions, the result is going to make something even worse, or it's going to make the thing that you're trying to deal with even worse. And that's again, that is typical of government policies that ignore, that are not, I shouldn't say just government policies that are not, but even just the nature of government policies so often ignore the basic principle, certainly the basic principle that me as a libertarian would go after, which is that, you should be free to, do as you choose, as long as you're not violating anyone else's rights to life, liberty, or property. If you're not doing that, you don't hurt people, don't take their stuff is the simpler way, I guess. If you're not doing that, then you should be free to do as you choose. And every time we try to deal with a problem or make something happen, but we engage in a policy that goes against those principles, that violates those rights, where people are otherwise voluntarily, cooperatively, they're not harming other people directly like that. It is, I think you're doomed to make it worse every time. I approach things from the perspective of that kind of principle when I'm trying to say, well, where do I stand on a policy? I usually base it off the principles like that. But what I find is that even if I didn't base it off principles myself, those principles predict the consequences. You ever heard the saying, the ends justifying the means? What I tend to find is that if your means, are wrong, if you're using bad means, if your means are violate those principles, you're probably never going to achieve the end you set out to do anyway, that you thought was going to justify it. That's what I see, what I perceive by and large. So.
Yeah, it's all good points. Let's do kind of like a round robin, quick, hit here because we're
Sure.
people. I've noticed they have kind of short attention spans, so I don't want to make this.
I can relate.
Because you and I, yeah, exactly. You and I could probably go on here for like 3 hours, and it seems like you're really good. You're covering these issues the way I would
Thank you.
want my Senate candidate to understand, and not just be like, give me a one-word answer or something. But you can give me like a short answer on
Sure.
this question. Is there such thing, Dennis, as an assault rifle? And if there is such a thing, should it be regulated or banned?
No firearms should be regulated or banned. People, and I'll try to keep this short. People try to go on about the Second Amendment and it didn't predict this kind of firearm or whatever. Look, the Second Amendment made it so that people could have the same weapons that any government's military would have. And that included like warships with cannons that were privately owned. So there's no reason why you wouldn't also have any one of these kind of firearms, not to mention the fact that what is generally referred to as assault rifles are specifically, they're talking about semi-automatic rifles that are not used by any military in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, no, should not be banned.
Okay.
I never purport myself to be a gun expert, but I've not heard anyone that I would consider a gun expert actually use that and believe that that's a substantive term. That's a political term.
Right. Okay. And would you get rid of red flag laws?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And friendly point for that, our illustrious incumbent Senator Marco Rubio has been, and he may have voted against the recent thing that went through the Senate, but he has been for at least 3 or 4 years continuously submitting, sponsoring legislation to fund or to basically bribe states into adopting red flag laws across the country in the U.S. Senate, proposing legislation to do that. So.
Yeah, well, let me just interject a quick point. You probably already know this because you're running against him and whoever the Democrat is. Marco Rubio won election, I believe, in the year 2010, if I'm not mistaken.
Originally,
he first got elected, and he got in via the Tea Party wave, and the Tea Party was probably one of the more hardcore pro-gun, get rid of a lot of the government, excess government,
that's what they said.
Individual liberty. I mean, it's a pretty good organization. I mean, you've read their.
I mean, that's what they presented.
Yeah,
that's what they presented. But it's one of these things where, again, show me, don't tell me.
Right.
In one sense, these guys were elected, like you said, back in 2010.
Yeah.
I think the national debt at that time was around 13 or 14 trillion.
Yeah.
Today it's 30 trillion.
Yeah.
It's not all their fault. It's not all Marco Rubio's fault, but there certainly hasn't been a united front to really stop the spending and everything. Right. And obviously we know what everyone was doing under Trump.
Yeah.
And
well, that's the weird.
What's the reality?
That's the weird thing. It's like it was, and I don't know if you've heard this, you probably heard this quote before, but I think it was Howard Phillips who ran for president as I think he was the Constitution Party, has this famous quote where he said that both parties are going over the same cliff, but at different speeds. And what the Republicans tend to do is promise fiscal responsibility. Vote for us. We're fiscally conservative. We're fiscally responsible, right? And then you're like, okay, you're blowing up the budget by only 20%, where the other guys were going to do 50. But yet we still don't have the money, right? We still don't have the money to cover the 20. We didn't have to cover the 50. So we print the money. So let me ask you this question. Should we abolish the Federal Reserve? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Okay, you're just hitting all these out of the park,
Hey man, look, you got the I see it says Mises or something else, but the revolution, Ron Paul is when I first got engaged into politics. Okay. The 08 race.
Good man.
So that was the first candidate I ever donated to. That was a lot of firsts for me, and in terms of being very eye-opening. And even before I heard his message, I kind of picked up on a certain fact that, during the when Bush was president, 6 out of the 8 years he had Republican majorities in Congress. What happened to the spending? And you can't just blame it on the wars either. No Child Left Behind, Medicare Part D,
Patriot Act too. Not that that's
Patriot
spending.
Act, and so it's not just the spending, it's the growth of government, it's the expansion of government power. And look, it's funny because I get into, I remember last year in particular getting into an argument with a certain Republican in our state on social media. And we had a little bit of back and forth. He's trying to, trying to paint, the Republican Party, that's the party of Ron Paul, and this was the party of whoever, and you guys are whatever.
All of a sudden,
I'm like, bro, this is the party of Bush, of McCain, Romney, and Trump. And there's like, well, no, but Trump, everything's different now, and the Republicans aren't the same. I'm like, look. We had a little back and forth. We just amicably,
agreed.
Stop going back and forth.
Yeah.
And I remember it was funny because then like 2 or 3 days later, after I stopped that conversation, they had a vote in the House. And 3/4 of the House Republicans voted against repealing the authorization to use military force in Iraq to stop Saddam Hussein from getting weapons of mass destruction. In 2021, okay, they were voting against repealing the authorization to go into Iraq to use military force in Iraq to stop Saddam Hussein from, I don't think Saddam Hussein's getting weapons of mass destruction. I think we can maybe we can pull that one back.
No, wait,
and
Dennis,
that's 3/4 of House Republicans.
No, Sean Hannity, Sean Hannity says, Dennis, that they move those weapons, and it's kind of, it's really weird. I mean, because if we could just find the weapons, then we could kind of clear everybody. But I think that the weapons, if they were there, they're probably supplied by the U.S. government anyway.
Well, that's what I was going to tell you was, the only weapons that they ultimately found were the ones that we gave them, like in the 80s and stuff, to go and gas against the Iranians or whoever. Right. We knew that they had stuff, but it's just funny because it's one of these classic things of like moving the goalposts or trying to one of the things at the time when they were really really ramping up, they're like talking about nukes, and Bush is like, we can't wait for the evidence that might have come in the form of a mushroom cloud. And of course, then it becomes more generic weapons of mass destruction. So it can be chemical weapons. It could be other stuff. It could be gas and stuff. But like I said, and when these guys were desperate and the war's going on, they some of them did use gas. They found these old stockpiles from when the U.S. was supplying them.
Right.
And anybody who's interested, because look, I've had a very realistic view of what U.S. foreign policy has been about for a long time. Like I said, I really kind of woke up with the Ron Paul campaigns, going back to when it was the primaries, like when the campaigning was starting back in 2007. Yeah. So I kind of understood that it's terrible, but I really recommend anybody who's interested in the topic, go read Scott Horton's book, Enough Already? Yeah. Time to End the War on Terror. Because, man, as bad as I knew it was, as bad as I thought it was. Right.
No, I have the book. It's out of reach. Otherwise, I'd grab it and give Scott a plug here.
Because as bad as I thought it was, man, it was so much worse.
Disturbing.
It's so much worse.
It's a disturbing read. It's disturbing because there's so much, and you're just like, because then you start to think to yourself, we're really that? See, it took me a while because I'm from the old school, America, we're just this, shining beacon, city on a hill, 1,000 points of light, all the slogans, maybe not 1,000 points of light, but all of these things over the years. And you believe, I live in a great country, and it's the country is fine. The people are good for the most part. It's the government that is problematic. And the government then convinces the people in the media, and they work together. And it's kind of like one network, basically. And then you've got corporations now that are in on it because they're getting kickbacks. And now you can't even, you go to Walmart and it's like, it's a political agenda at Walmart. And you're like, crap, there's not even, so then you got to go back to your mom and pop businesses to find real kind of entrepreneurial spirit, or guys that are trying to kind of invent stuff or do stuff, just apart from this this network of corruption and payoffs, and it's crazy. Anyway, I wanted to do the round robin thing. I wanted to get in a couple more here before we quit.
Sure.
What's your view on the climate crisis? Are we in a climate crisis? And if we are, even if it's a man-generated crisis, which my view on this is there's not enough data. That's my view. Because what I would need is thousands of years of data to make a determination to say, yep, we're doing this, right? Now, I know about the industrial age, and I know about, like, we've changed since the 1970s. I mean, we've really changed a lot of what we do. Some of it to the detriment of consumers, obviously, as we can clearly indicate here. But what's your view on climate change? Is green and solar the answer? Is wind the answer? Or is there something else out there, Dennis, that maybe we should be pursuing that actually could solve all of these problems, maybe more in an entrepreneurial way, like a businessman or a scientist or an inventor? And there's technology that maybe we're not pursuing that could really solve the problem. Is this just one big grift? Are we in the grift of the green movement? What's your view on this?
I guess I might imagine that there's some amount of grift in there, just because, I mean, I've been hearing doomsday prophecies since, as long as I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was in probably, in middle school or something, and watching some documentary on network TV. It was telling me that, half of Florida, I grew up in Miami, born and raised.
Yeah.
That, the southern half of Florida was going to be underwater, by the time I was going to graduate high school, which made me really depressed because I didn't really like the idea of having to move away.
No.
And then I realized, obviously, that none of it happened.
Right.
So I have a little bit of skepticism, but at the same time, look, I do believe in, like, being a responsible steward of the earth. Okay, I think as an individual level, as people, we I teach my kids not to, just leave trash lying around. Pick up after yourself. Don't. You have to take care of the earth. The earth is something, from a broader perspective that we have responsibility to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not there is a crisis, even if there's not a crisis, you should still not treat the earth like garbage. So, I mean, there's that.
100%.
But the other thing I'd say is, what's the answer? I think the answer is freedom. I think most people want to take care of the earth. I think comparatively few people have a total disregard for it. Certainly there's some, but I think also where people do care about it, they work and they come up with different ideas and industries. And one of those things is solar. And, I'm not going to say that solar is going to solve all our energy problems and it's going to be, provide power and it's going to replace everything else. I don't think that's true, but certainly at an individual level, look, what other kind of power plant can you put on your house? You can put solar panels on top of your house and you can generate some power, and it at least offsets what you consume. So I think things like that at an individual level are better. And I think there are things that we, obviously I'm not going to talk about government policy to encourage it. I think people should do it if it makes sense for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think we should encourage people to do it and go out of our way to do it. Because maybe it's not the right answer. We shouldn't encourage people to do anything because the government's not going to really know what the right answer is. The right answer is to let ideas in the marketplace go around. I recall seeing, and I don't remember the details of it at all, but some guy who had invented something where he was kind of like harvesting and like picking up all this like stray plastic out in the ocean or something. The kind of stuff that people talk about in terms of pollution like that and why recycling is so important. And he was doing something to clean it up that way. And it was some kind of startup or whatever. And it's things like that I think are a better way of dealing with that than obviously government policy. Oh, here I'll add one more in here. The U.S. military, if it were a country unto itself, would be in the top 50 polluters. Okay, it pollutes more than like 100 and some odd other countries, not combined, but it would be up there if it was a country on its own. It's not surprising if you're going to be policeman of the world. That's a big beat to have to patrol, and you burn a lot of fuel. You could bring all the troops home and stop doing that. And that would help with the earth. That would reduce the carbon footprint. But but I'll finish off with this because this is a long answer for what should be a short answer.
Sorry.
Governments do a lot of the polluting. Of the top 15 polluters in the world, I think, about half or a little bit more than half are like government-owned petroleum companies. And government does all this polluting, and then it demands a sacrifice of the individual to, and I say demand in terms of like making policy changes and denying you access to certain things, instead of the government who is doing all this polluting. Biden's in Europe with like an 85 car motorcade or whatever, that kind of thing. While they're doing that, they're going to turn around and demand that we make sacrifices. I think it's got to be the other way around. The government needs to make sacrifices. The government needs to cut back, and the people should be free, because everybody's in a different position in terms of what sacrifices you can make. But that's where I'd go with it.
Yeah, I would just want to add to that, and I don't know how you feel about this. First of all, I don't think the government should be picking winners or losers in this. I don't think the government should say, hey, even though you mentioned solar, I'm okay with solar, but right now, when it comes to like petroleum, right, when people need to, and thank goodness the prices are coming down a bit, and people don't understand why the prices at the pump are coming down. It's because people decided, okay, it cost me $70 to fill up my gas tank. I guess I'm not going to fill up my gas tank. I guess I'm going to drive half as much. And so that happened, I remember 10 years ago during the Bush-Obama transition there, where the prices went way up, and then people were like, crap. And then the economy kind of collapsed a bit, and everything retracted, and people had to make decisions based on that. What I'm saying is, we can't just transition from something that we're all using to something that's not sufficient enough to replace what we're using. And the government nudging you. Biden said a couple weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, he said, we're in this transition. I'm like, whoa. Transition to what? What am I going to put in my car? Now, if I'm really wealthy, I can go out and Elon Musk will get me a nice Tesla and I will be happy. And then I'm going to replace the battery in a few years, which is going to be made with all the same crap that's destroying the planet and polluting. And it's going to cost me $10,000 to $15,000 to replace the battery in the car. I don't know if that's what I'm saying is there's probably an entrepreneurial solution waiting that is probably cure. In other words, there's medicine out there that would cure this problem, but we're not investing in that research to go from these products that supposedly are causing all these problems, which again, to me, again, I just don't have enough data. Go ahead.
And when you say investing, I want to be, at least, from my standpoint, because I was, making some little comments here and there recently with the bill that just passed in the Senate. Rubio didn't vote for it, but he didn't vote for it because, about, maybe money going to China because of whatever. But they're, investing in semiconductor and chips and whatever. Again, I don't think that's the role for the government.
True. Okay.
So investment in the free market, people deciding, hey, I believe in this. I think this is viable. I think this has a future. Not government pursuing an agenda, people in government pursuing an agenda, deciding I'm going to put tax dollars into this thing. Like we know we're 30 trillion in debt, and 8 or 9% inflation. We don't have it. We can't afford it. Oh, fun point with the NDAA and the upcoming military budget. Part of what they have in there, I think in the Senate version, has an extra 13 billion to account for inflation. Never mind the fact that we're going to create more inflation because, again, we're going to keep spending more than we have. And, where's it going to come from? So, all right, let's keep going.
All right. Well, let's kind of wrap it. I could talk about lots of things. I used to talk to libertarians, and I don't take this the wrong way. The first thing they would talk about is, we're going to legalize pot. That was the first thing. And I'm like, that's cool. I'm not necessarily against that. I'm kind of like agnostic there. I'm not thinking it's the most healthy thing for your body, whatever, but that's again, that falls under freedom, and it falls under, a product. And by the way, the pharmaceutical companies hate that because it's just, they can't market their toxins to everybody.
Well, they like it as long as they can control it. Like there was a ballot initiative. I don't think it got onto the ballot, but there was one that they were petitioning for, trying to go a couple of years ago, I think. But it would legalize it in certain senses, but it would put a prohibition on home grow in the Constitution. And so that was something where people were like, yeah, this is really kind of like suspect to really just, this is like an industry thing. And I mean, to your point, look, it's, when I talk about the drug war or anything like that, it's certainly not about me, and it doesn't even matter whether something is good for you or bad for you. The thing that's extra bad for you is prohibition. Prohibition makes it worse. It makes it more dangerous. It pushes people to, like I mentioned earlier, pushes people to more potent, more dangerous drugs, and there's a whole bunch of downstream negative impacts. So
no, and it's just exciting. Here's where I guess I'm trying to come from here. It's just happy to hear some great foreign policy conversation. It's great to hear just about the anti-mandate. I'm looking for in a candidate is somebody who's serious about these things. I mean, you hear one side talks a good game some of the time, and you get hooked into that. The other side talks like lunatics, which makes the other side sound better, right? So then you got somebody like yourself who comes along, and you're in a debate. Now, say we get you on the debate stage. You're on there. It would be the worst nightmare for those other two candidates to have seriously. And this is what drives me crazy is here's the guy over here who can answer the question about Ukraine. Here's the guy who can talk about the drug war. Here's the guy who can talk about the Federal Reserve and the economy and running the printing presses and all these issues, right? And then we're not going to hear from that guy because that guy's not allowed to be in the debate. You get on the debate stage with Rubio and Val Demings or whatever her name is, and you're up there. What are you going to convey to that audience? What do you want people to know about not just libertarians, but just you, like what you think is better for this country as far as a direction, the role of government in people's lives? Just like summarize, like I know this is difficult and I'm just throwing all this at you, but I want to blow up the internet. I want somebody to go, this is the kind of candidate we need more of all over the country, not just in Florida. We have a great opening here because you've got a neocon Republican. He's not Rand Paul. He's not Thomas Massey. He's not anybody who has like any shred. He's an establishment puppet. So, and then you said, and the Democrat, and the Democrat's going to be, if it's possible, the Democrat's going to be worse.
The same.
Or the same, right?
Yeah. And she literally, one of the things he hit her on when she first announced was, and this is quite literally, in the previous session of Congress, she literally voted 100% in lockstep with Nancy Pelosi. What more do you need to hear than that?
And that's literally, but that's why the Republican Party can go around and say, hey, we've got a better, because they have a better candidate, but it's like my old analogy there with Howard Phillips. They're going over the cliff and they're just, you go 70 or 80 over here and you're going over at 50, right? But you're still going over. They might say some things. You go, they really care about me. They care about the country. But then the results, like you said, don't just talk about stuff, do stuff. So, I can't really give you like, what would you vote for? I mean, we all know that Rubio is going to, in lockstep, vote for the military industrial complex in lockstep. He's going to cover for them, as we saw with, his little episode there with, I always want to say Valerie Jarrett, but it's Victoria Nuland. It's just on my brain. It might be the same viewpoint, I'm sure. The point I'm getting at is, if you get in that debate, I mean, you're just gonna let, I think, haymakers go, right? Because what have you got to lose?
Well, I mean, we have to make noise as best we can and let people know where we stand and highlight that difference. Like I said, those two are going to essentially, like you say, be in lockstep when it comes to supporting the military industrial complex and keep, whether it's tacit or even open, approval and support for the Federal Reserve. People got to understand, the biggest things that have the most either the most extreme negative impact, which I think is war, you're talking about killing people,
Yeah.
or when you talk about the most widespread negative impact, which is inflation, which is killing everybody in the sense of your what you can spend, your ability to provide for your family and for yourself,
Right.
is all inhibited by it. And it's all a predictable consequence of the policies that these people have supported and will continue to support. They are going to be on that side, and they are going to continue to spend more than we have and end up printing more money.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to continue on with the same foreign policy of intervening around the world. It'll inspire the next generation of terrorists. Something I really encourage anybody who's interested in that as well. A real short read. If you've never heard of it, was written by Harry Brown, who was the 2000 and 1996 Libertarian candidate for president. There's a little article called "When Will We Learn," which was from September 12th, 2001.
Yeah.
For all of us who are old enough to remember, where we were and what everybody was thinking at that time in this country, it's interesting to see, where libertarians at that time already had a pretty clear understanding of, and the willingness to be thoughtful and rational about what was happening.
Right.
Because, like with COVID and the fear that got up around that, and certainly with fear around other things that permit people to do something. One of the things like, gosh, this really get me off on a tangent when you talk about like with the mass shootings and stuff recently, or the near mass shooting also, that was stopped early, thankful to a gun owner. But my point there being is that they try to leverage people's fear and emotions to get things done. But one of the obvious things I think for everybody is, who in your personal life, when you make a decision, your personal life, your business life, whatever, who thinks that you make the best decisions when you're like emotional, right after some kind of trauma, right after some kind of extreme event? Nobody.
Right.
All of us recognize that you make your best decisions when you give things thought, you're rational and you're introspective and this sort of thing. And so, this is just part and parcel of how these guys operate and what they do. For me, if I'm given the opportunity, obviously I'm calling these things out. Look, we're 30 trillion in debt. Inflation is killing everybody. And you guys want to increase spending on this other stuff. You want to spend 100 billion to train Ukrainian fighter pilots to fly American planes and then send them over there with American planes, because that really wouldn't be a provocation, to escalate this conflict. If they want to keep doing this stuff and keep just burning through money. And look, when they want to pull out name a program that's like unassailable, like, oh, the stuff for helping veterans and this, I'm like, look, I don't have a problem. Like, I can compromise and say, okay, fine, we want to do that, we'll do that. How are we going to pay for it? We got to pay for it somehow.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody in the world, all the regular people who are watching it, all of them have to live within those constraints of reality. You can't spend more than you have, or you can't never-endingly spend. That's not really a word, but you cannot eternally go on spending more than you have.
Yeah.
Everybody has to deal with limits, and all of us are forced to budget. All of us are forced to live within those constraints.
Right.
Why are these people so incapable of doing that? And why can't we have people who are? And I'm willing to. So, that's part of the difference. And it's calling those things out, but it's getting the opportunity and having people listen, is really the trick. And it's not easy, so
how do we
can use all the help we can get.
Is there a threshold to get you into the debate?
I haven't been made aware of, I'm certainly there would be some kind of polling threshold, but I'm absolutely certain I'm not being included in almost any polls at this point. So neither me nor the couple of NPAs that are also on the ballot.
Right.
So it's tricky business. We have to find a way to make noise on our own. Right now it's tricky. We don't have a great deal of resources to kind of do that. So it's getting everywhere I can to at least, have people see my name. I got an endorsement from, was it Stand for Health Freedom, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
On their voter guide for Florida, endorsed right under DeSantis.
Nice.
So,
Hey,
I'll take it.
Yeah, and he's obviously popular, and it's not stupid to try to. I mean, there are some issues he's really good on, and I think there's some people that would like to see more what we call based opinions and more like to the heart of the problem rather than just kind of. I mean, I see one of the reasons I wanted to have you
he ended
on.
up on the right side of one of the big issues. So
yes, well, I think you're on the right side of. I mean, we can, some people will probably debate immigration with you and typically immigration and drugs and those sorts of things. You always get that, but your views aren't ridiculous. Your views, I think, are in line with fixing problems and not just kicking the can and saying, we can do the same thing. We just need more money to enforce this or do that. When you have to get to, it's kind of like when you have an issue in your health, rather than just treat symptoms, you have to kind of find out what's causing the problem so you don't have those symptoms anymore. And I think people are ready.
I'll tell you, that's well, I'll tell you, that's the thing that I hear, especially from Democrats, but also from Republicans. They talk about this or that with inflation. They talk about, we got an inflation action plan and we're going to do this or that. And it's, how are they going to have an inflation action plan when they ignore or outright deny the causes of inflation?
Right.
And it's real simple. I keep going back to this little clip from, I think it's from 60 Minutes. They're interviewing Jerome Powell, and he's like, and they say, so you flooded the system with money. He's like, yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We did. Where does it come from? Oh, do you just print it? And he's like, we print it digitally.
Yeah.
And, it's, but it's in plain sight if anyone wants to see it or hear it. But it's always the thing that is, it's basically what you said. They want to, and it's indicative of these sort of things. You have bad policy creates a problem.
Yeah.
And then we're going to add some other policy to try to address the problems that other bad policy created without ever dealing with the original bad policy.
Right.
For so many of these issues, when people ask about what are you going to do about this kind of problem or that kind of problem, a lot of the times I think the first thing we should do is stop doing the policies. Stop engaging in the policies that are creating these problems or exacerbating these problems. As a first thing, let's stop making it worse. That seems simple enough. So,
I think you're in keep it simple like that. Yeah, I mean, I think you're in a really good position to make some noise in this race and to at least get people thinking about these issues when you've got two candidates that are going to pretty much continue to blow up the deficit, continue to vote for endless war spending, to really not care about working class citizens or their concerns, which is another big issue these days, that people just don't think government listens, and most people just want to be left alone. This is another big issue. Just leave me alone. Don't give me a mandate. Don't give me a rule. I can take care of myself. Yes, I'm aware of my own risks in life, because I mean, what government is trying to do these days, Dennis, is just to say, hey, we need to mitigate every risk out there in the world. And I'm sorry, you're born into this world. As soon as you're born in, even before you're born in, apparently there's some risks. But once you're born in, you're always going to be at risk of something. And, to take all the shiny, sharp objects out of the way and try to make everybody afraid and fearful, this is creating a very unproductive society, a fearful, unproductive, and people that are waiting, for that old analogy, the helicopter to show up and rescue me. It's like the God thing. I sent you all this stuff, and you kept saying you need all that stuff.
Yeah. But I know that story.
Yeah, but in the end of it,
but to that point, man.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Like when we were talking earlier about COVID, this is one of the things is it's on every individual to decide how much risk you want to take.
Right.
Okay. That's within everybody's purview to decide how much risk are you willing to accept? Do you not want to leave your house, or are you willing to leave your house and interact with people? But it's up to you to decide what kind of risks you want to take.
Yeah. Yeah, and it goes that way for like leaving the house to go to the grocery store. You know what I mean? It's like you could have your food delivered. You could have your food delivered right now if you want to. I mean, I guess that became an opportunity. That's somebody trying to solve a problem.
Opened up new revenue streams, new business opportunities. Right. New business models. Let's say things are evolving, and that's fine. Look, all the people working remotely. I've been working remotely pretty much since the thing began for different reasons. So. So it's all part and parcel, and there's nothing wrong with some of that happening. It's just a question of how much of that is top down versus how much of that is people choosing, well, this is the thing that works best for me, so we're going to do it this way.
Yeah.
And it's just what is going to be the thing that gets us to where we want to be in terms of that. Here's the one last thing I'd throw into there, though. You mentioned about how everybody, they just leave me alone. Everybody kind of has that mentality. Now, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people. I think most people. Yeah. And the thing that I try to, what's the word I'm looking for? Part of the message I always want to kind of convey to people is that the best way for any one of us to be free, for you to be free, or for me to be free, for any one of us to actually be free, is for everybody to be free. Yeah. Okay. Because if we're not all free, if there's some people whose things are restricted, and it's not any of us really being free, we're just happen to be, in line with the flavor of the month, and when things shift and power shifts to somebody who thinks a little differently, well, then it might be restrictions on us. Yeah. And that's the reality of it. The only way for any one of us to really be free is for all of us to have the same rights respected, and to have government out of the way, not interfering, allowing us to live according to our values and build the best life we can.
All right. Well, I think on that note, I'm going to wrap things up here. That was kind of a good conclusion. Let's just get where can people find you on social media? Also, you must have a campaign website. Maybe somebody wants to donate to the campaign. We got to get that information out there.
Absolutely. So I've had it in the corner. I don't know how this is going to come out on the video, but I've got on the corner over here my URL, which is just my last name, misigoy.com. If you go there, usually you can find the latest live stream is at the top, but especially whether you're looking at a desktop, it's in the top right, or if you're looking on a mobile browser, it'll be just under the title. There's a big old yellow button, gold, says donate. Click there. Like I said, we need the support. We don't have the kind of resources that the old parties have. Right. And we don't need necessarily the same resources, but we need enough to be able to reach people in more places. And that is a challenge. So if you want it, we're accepting Bitcoin donations too. So if that's the way you want to do things, you can do it that way as well. But go through, there's a little form there. We got to collect the information because the FEC makes us, but we need that help. On social media, at Dennis Misigoy, one word. Just my name, no space, no underscore, no nothing, just at Dennis Misigoy. On Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram at elect Misigoy, all one word. So and if you go to the website, the links are also there. There's also a link to the YouTube channel and everything else, so you can find everything. If you just go to the website, you can find the social media links there as well. Get you follow the stuff we're talking about, be a part of the conversations. Twitter's probably the thing I'm most active with at this point. Yeah. But you usually see also live stream on Facebook, usually once a week, and we'll keep trying to announce things that we'll be getting around the state here and there. Yeah, excellent. All right, folks. You heard a really great candidate running for the United States Senate here in the state of Florida. I would be really open-minded if you're, maybe you're thinking that you just have to vote for the lesser of two evils. You don't have to. You can actually vote for somebody who's good instead of the lesser. And we need to start voting for better candidates to get these candidates elected. And whether it's this time or next time, Dennis, I'm hoping it's this time, because again, we need help sooner than later to get our government under control. So again, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much again for having me. I really appreciate it.